The next step in After Effects is going to be actually editing your composition. So one thing is you usually want to work with, in After Effects, you want to work with 1920 by 1080, 23.976 frames a second, but you may have shot your stuff differently, like maybe it's shot at 12 or 15, that's fine. And we're going to work through a system of what's called pre-comping, and I'll walk through sort of what I did to get this final image. So this is what this thing looks like as the camera moves, and you've got some flickering and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close out of all of these, and I'm going to delete all of these compositions. Delete that. So I'm going to start fresh. So whenever you start fresh, you shouldn't have anything in After Effects. You should be able to bring in your footage and interpolate it as like a video, but if it's just one picture for now, that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to bring in that picture. I'm going to make a new comp from this footage. So I could right click this and say new comp from selection. And a comp is basically it's like a Photoshop document, but it has a timeline. So this is your timeline down here. It's 30 seconds long by default. You can change that. There's a lot here, but the first thing I usually do is I'm going to apply lumetri color and get my LUT in here, just like I did in the last video. So I'm going to browse for the LUT, open it up. Okay, the LUT is in here. And this is my effect controls where I can actually see the effects. So if I need to change anything after I've applied the LUT, if I need to change like the temperature or adjust the exposure, which I might need to just a little bit just to get a little more light and contrast out of here, I can do that now. So down here you have your different layers. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. You have your different layers, and each layer has properties. So if I split this down, I have effects that are applied, and then I have transformation properties. That includes things like the position of the image. That includes stuff like the scale of the image, the rotation of the image, and the opacity. Okay, and all of these things have these little stopwatches next to them, and that means that they can be animated. So I'll show you an example of animation. We're going to fade this in. So I'm going to start this at 0. So the opacity is at 0. You can't see it. I hit the stopwatch button. And so right now it made what's called the keyframe. And then if I move my playhead along the timeline, let's say by 10 seconds I want it to be fully in. As I adjust this number, notice it just made a second keyframe. And so now it knows that's my B point at 100. This is my A point at 1. So if I hit play, it slowly fades in, cranking this up to 100 over those 10 seconds. Okay, so we can always adjust these keyframes afterwards. So let's say I want this fade to happen faster. I can move it closer. So now it fades in a little faster. Okay. To delete them, I can just click and delete. But yeah, so there's lots of playing with keyframes that you'll have to do to get your animations correct. But I'm going to show you some basic things that I applied to this image. I don't like to apply effects directly to the layer, so I use what are called adjustment layers. So I right-click, I say New, and then Adjustment Layer. And that's basically an invisible layer that sits on top of others that lets you add adjustments. In this case, I'm going to add a vignette. So a vignette is an effect that adds some darkness around the frame. So that's a really extreme version of it, but I'm going to lessen that up. So just get a little bit of something there. We can change the angle of the vignette. We can adjust the center of the vignette and where the highlights are. So let's start this with a pretty low effect, so it's like a little more intense. I'm going to add another. I can rename this layer, by the way, and like actually call this vignette. Okay. I'm going to call this one background. All right, let's add another adjustment layer. And with this one, let's do some of our lighting here. Actually, I'll do this as a solid. So I'm going to make a new solid. That's going to be, I want kind of an orangish light. That, say okay. Okay, so solid is just a graphic that is like the size of your comp that you can move around and stuff and animate. And there's a bunch of tools up here, including masking tools. So I can use the pen tool to draw a shape, and it will mask that layer to that shape. Or what I might do instead of the pen tool is use one of these shape tools, like the rectangle, that also will create a mask. And notice like whenever I do that, you see the mask down here, and there's things that you can do to modify your mask. So I'm going to start with just drawing a simple shape that is going to go over my lantern over here. So that mask has properties down here, including things like feathering, so making it like softer, including things like opacity, so how visible it is, and including the expansion, so if I need to extend it a little bit. I'm going to expand my mask. I'm going to feather it significantly so it gets softer, and I'm going to kind of create this like soft glow system here. I'm going to lower the opacity of this layer. So what you can see now is I have this like kind of fuzzy glow over my specific lantern. So within this, I can also modify the mode. So if you know about like modes within Photoshop, you can try these different blend modes to do different things. I'm going to use like screen, which will just add some lightness to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate the mask opacity. So I want it to flicker back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my animation here at 33%. I'm going to go to about 10 seconds, and I'll up it to like 40, 50%. So what I'm going to do is make this thing flicker using the Wiggler tool. So if I go to Wiggler, and if you don't see Wiggler, you go to Window and then Wiggler. You select both. And over here in the Wiggler, you have the frequency, which is like how often it wiggles, and the magnitude. So 1 means it would wiggle one value up, one value down. So we're starting at 30 and we're ending at 50. So let's set our magnitude to about 20. And let's set our frequency to about 2 per second and hit apply and see what happens. So what we have is a kind of glowing, flickering light, and now you can see how it kind of pulsates. So if I need to change that, maybe I need a lesser magnitude, I can hit apply. So now that adds a little nice animation to it. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is add another adjustment. Let's do another adjustment layer. And I was using like some VHS flicker effect thing, which is like really intense. Like this is probably too intense. But the benefit of using an adjustment layer is that you can always lower it by changing its opacity. So we can make the effect a little less severe. Yeah, so once we're done with this composition, I would go back to my project. I'm going to make my kind of final comp. I'll call this like final. And this one is the one that's going to be 1920 by 1080. And you can pull comps into other comps. So in this case, my source image is huge because I was using, a camera and not a video camera. And so I can actually keyframe and animate this because like I have this little window. So what I'm going to do is use the motion sketch tool. If you don't see that, you go to Window and then Motion Sketch. And what's cool with the motion sketch is you can capture your mouse movement. So I'll hit Start Capture. And I can click and start dragging and release. And what I get is a little animation of it sort of moving. Now, right now it's rendering. It's not going to play in real time. So you have to let this go green. Let me rewind and play it again. And there you go. You got a little animation. It's a little gooby. You might separate it out and select these and like, I think if you hold, is it Option? I think it'll evenly, distribute them. So now you can make something a little smoother. Again, you have to let things render first. Then I can zoom back and play again in real time. So now it's playing in real time. And there you have it.